So this isn't my dime. This is Jake's agenda today. We're just using my platform because we promised to do this for a while now, and the conditions finally met, schedules matched up, whatever needed to take place is here today. So I always love to find out how in the hell did you find me in the first place, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and then for our listeners, welcome back to Aliens, UFOs, and Ghost Stories. I'm your host, Jake, and obviously today I'm joined by Lowell Johnson. I first heard you, Lowell, from my sister. My sister and I are both experiencers. Our listeners, of course, know all about it. So if you'd like, you could ask a couple questions, but they're all, relatively traditional to, any experiencer or contactee. But she, where I do a lot of my research, through a little bit of reading, but predominantly podcasts, she does a lot of her digging on YouTube. And I believe that's where she found you. And then, of course, I went on to Spotify and Apple and started searching your name and Telos, of course, Mount Shasta. And I've probably listened to three or four of your podcasts, which again, if you guys are listening to this, if you guys want to learn more about the subject itself or Telos or Lowell, I strongly recommend that it's really simple. Just go to Spotify, Audible, anywhere you listen to your podcast, you can just search his name and you'll find a lot of his interviews.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So do you mind telling our new listeners or somebody who might not have heard of you yet, kind of your story in general, or I mean, I guess where it all began in Mount Shasta?
There are a lot of things that led up to my visit to Shasta that would be really important for you to understand on how I got there in the first place and what I really went there seeking. Because the two intents I had behind them, they didn't play out the way that I thought they were going to. But I had been in a metaphysical journey for a few years before that. I was interested in past lives, and in particular, Atlantis was always in my field. And I really wanted help with understanding more about that. It just happened to be that oh, I had to learn meditation, which was triggered by a TIA I had late in 2015. So if you know what a TIA is, it's a mini stroke. And that was kind of my NDE. When I point back to that particular timeline, everything before that was I lived a life like everybody else. I was a hospitality executive working in hotels and casinos and resorts, and I had a pretty good life, making decent money, and had a pretty good reputation. And I had a reputation as I made things better. I thrilled when we could take something else and kind of polish it up and make it better and change the culture of the staff along the way. Thrived in that environment, and then this happens, and when it happened, the surgeon at the time said, there's going to be about 30 days it's going to take for you to recover. And among the things that he recommended, for therapy was meditation. Well, hell, I was interested in meditation for a long time before that, heard about it, certainly knew people that, I witnessed their advantages and what came out of it, but I just could never get my mind to quiet that way. But here, if I was going to be laid up on the couch for 30 days, here'd be a perfect place for me to start to experiment. So I spent tons of time Googling everything I could. And the only thing I couldn't seem to find was a freaking mantra. Whatever that was, I could not find one on the internet. And then, about the third time I've seen the movie The Secret. This is one of those times I had downtime. So let's revisit that again and see what it says. That's when transcendental meditation was, kind of placed in my path. And I went, oh, wait a minute. If it's as simple as they say it is, then, I should at least try it so I'll know for myself. They're not on every corner. those trainers because they're all trained exactly the same way and have been since Maharishi passed it down. It's a 4 consecutive day process, 1 hour each day, except the first day is 90 minutes. It turned out that there was a trainer in my area and she was less than a mile from my house. So there was intent behind how all this was lining up. And by the third day, I could get to that place, not regularly. That was going to take months to kind of refine, but getting to that place where you can quiet your mind and to that place where they claim you're standing in the field of probabilities and you lay your intent out and just watch for the universe to return it. I found that spot. And over months, because it would take months, you can get there regularly. Well, when you can get that quiet, you can start to connect to other dimensions and higher aspects, not just yourself. And that's what was beginning to happen to me. And I didn't understand it at the time. I was having these profound thoughts that when I uttered them, surprised me. Where did I get that? Some of the colleagues I worked with. And so, really, I was in the last consulting gig I was doing in a casino that I'd been to in Baton Rouge before. And like halfway through the gig, something inside of me is just going, you're supposed to be doing something else. So I left the gig. I left a decent salary and a place I enjoyed being and all the perks that came with it because I was supposed to go chase something else. Shortly after the end of that, which was the beginning of 2020, yeah, I was due to close on a house in Las Vegas. I was just going to go consult out of there, and most of the work I was getting for friends of mine that were in the business and they were located there. So I thought how convenient that would be. Climate's decent, easy to get in and out of there. That was what I was going to do. And then on my way driving from Louisiana, I had some time in between, so I thought I'd go visit my son in California for about a week before I had to close on this place in Vegas. And during the drive across the country, my guides are just nagging me, don't close on the house. Don't close on the house. So I'm within, the 30-day window. And what, money I had down as earnest money, I knew I was going to sacrifice that. But I made the decision to, pay attention to what they were telling me. And I did it on the way. So by the day I got to my son's house, I'd shared with him what my plans were. And then 2 days later, COVID shuts everybody down. Okay, well now I understand why you're not having me relocate to Nevada, and then things just begin from there. It was that summer when there was plenty of time to do whatever. I found someone that could help me with a past life regression because I'd gotten to that level of curiosity that helped walk me through Atlantis. We can't really learn about Atlantis without at least hearing about Lemuria. But I had no knowledge, not that in-depth knowledge of Lemuria and Telos. I was ignorant to all of it. So by the first part of July, things are beginning to relax. And we're no longer on lockdown, but you can tell there's going to be restrictions if you decide to go anywhere else. Well, I just wanted to get out in nature because that's where all this magic happens for me. And I had intended to leave where I am about an hour north of San Francisco and head for the Four Corners in the Southwest, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. There's so many national parks there, gorgeous. That's where I was headed. And when I started to do my research that day, you could see social media posts suggesting that some of these places might not even be open under the circumstances. And as soon as that thought in my head, Mount Shasta was the next thing that came into my head. Why? I don't know. I've driven by it a few times, but I really didn't know. I'd heard about, kind of magic that's up there, but never enough to pursue it. From where I lived, it was about a 4-hour drive. So I thought, well, that's great. That's a morning or an afternoon for me, and I can be there. I made the decision that I was going to go up it was the first week in July. Uh, My son was off too. He was and his roommates, wondering what they were going to do. So I thought I'd go there for a week, and then, seeing how we had downtime, he would meet me either in Reno or Tahoe the following week. Well, when I got to Shasta, um, I hiked every day, not knowing where the hell I was going. I learned on the first day when I went to an area looking for some things that I could feel energetically, that I started to travel downhill and travel all these interesting places. That was the day I learned when you're going to hike, pick uphill at the first part of your day, because you're not going to want to do that at the end of the day when you're so fatigued. Having said that, though, I went out the next day and hiked like I was in my 20s, not realizing that I should have been fatigued. My muscles should have been sore, and I'm not a spring chicken anymore. It would take me a week before I realized, wow, there's some kind of physical thing here that's palpable, because I should be tired and I'm not. My joints aren't sore, none of that. And it wouldn't be, by the time I get to the end of the first week, I said to my son, there's something I want to explore here. And I hadn't gone to the same place twice. So he said, stay as long as you want. Um, I ended up staying 5 weeks. And the only reason I went back is because I had to be back in Santa Rosa the first part of August. Otherwise, I would have stayed longer. There was just an energy that you got plugged into that I can't put it into words, but it's there. I love to hear from the people that have been there now, because I like to hear their experience and how it matches up with mine. And more people feel whatever this sensation is, and it just thrills me to no end. So that was what got me to Shasta. Now, I had certainly heard stories about Saint Germain, and that guy was no legend. He came out of the forest in the 30s and ran into Guy Ballard. And Guy wrote what, 12, 14 books, whatever he wrote on the exchange between the two of them, was meant for, helping humanity improve, their evolution. Um, there was something to it. There got to be a huge following behind this effort. And once Guy and his wife, finished touring, and they passed on, the Saint Germain Foundation just kind of went. Um, there's too much in the way of third dimensional duality lessons that we can't separate ourselves yet from, and that's what kind of keeps us vibrating at this lower level. What we're trying to do now is help people understand there's a different spectrum of light that's hitting the earth and all the sentient life on it, different than what we've experienced in cosmic history. And it's all meant to elevate, everyone's vibration. Now, humans have been tinkered with along the way. So, we required some help from outside ourselves so that we can take in this new spectrum of light. But the earth, she's a sentient being of her own. She is evolving this time once and for all. So whether we're on board with her or not has no bearing on where she's going. And we are at the final stages of her going from 3 to 4. Our job is to just make sure that our vibration matches hers when she reaches that place. Because if it doesn't, everything else just entropies away. Now, that's a mouthful to say. And for the uninitiated, they're going to think, well, what do you mean I die? That would be the third dimensional way to look at it. The way that I see it is that you're a soul riding around in this carbon body that you're in right now that was only suited for 80 to 100 years in the first place. So, yes, you're going to move on to something else. But some of that light that's been coming our way is cellularly changing us for the new form we're about to take, because we've been light beings all this time stuck in this physical form. We're no longer going to be carbon, and what we needed has been embedded inside of us so that we're going to blossom into crystalline form as soon as this other transition for Earth takes place. What we need is already there. At the same time, our DNA is being cracked wide open so that we have access to everything we've done and every Akashic experience we've ever had. And now all those gifts and powers are coming back to our command because we need them now. Now the job is to try and help others see the same thing in themselves because nobody's different than me. And really, we're all hanging on, waiting for the day when we abide by the law of one again and we understand we're connected to every other person here. That is right around the corner. As we've been straddling these dimensions, I keep seeing that. And somebody had asked me, last year about some of the disappearances in Mount Shasta. And that was about the time I was coming to the conclusion that who's to say that people didn't get to that next realm and didn't come back? Because given the right circumstances, and now, even now, what I know is coming, where I've been, what I've touched, I have a hard time coming back here. But I have family and friends that I feel like I have an obligation to help them with this along the way. A lot of them just don't understand what I'm saying yet, but the day is going to come when you're going to wish you did. And so that's the purpose I'm here to serve. So I'll take a breath now.
I mean, no, you're good. Trust me. Uh, Sometimes these turn into more of a conversation back and forth. And to be honest, Lowell, I prefer them to be much more about our guests. The thing is, our listeners, they know every bit of my experience. And just to keep reiterating it over and over and over gets a little old. But uh, one of the most fascinating stories that I've heard you tell a couple times was the very first interaction that you had with the being in or on Mount Shasta. Do you care to share that?
Sure. Well, that was kind of the next stage. Um, when I was telling the story about Saint Germain, really that's what I was hoping somewhere out in the forest, all by myself, that I would run into an ascended master. I've been searching for connections to spirit for a long time now, and have been successful in a lot of unorthodox ways, let's say. I've been on ayahuasca journeys that got me there, and that connection to that kind of spirit is undeniable. And you don't forget it. That was one way I got there. It's not a way that I recommend for everybody, but it got me there. The idea that I might have that same kind of interaction that nobody's had since the 1930s, maybe it's my turn. That's what I went to Shasta looking for the day that I went on the mountain. And this particular day, I'd seen a couple of days prior to where I was going to end up hiking, looking at Shastina, which is just to the left of Mount Shasta. And when you looked at it, under the noon sun, which is when this time when I particularly noticed it, the shadows almost looked like there were cave openings there. So I wanted to go investigate that, explore that area. It was that Sunday I went back to do that. And after finding on my way there, I'm not going where everybody else is going. I could feel these energy pods, if you want to see them that way, that I would stop and just take in whatever this was, because the exchange was, I just keep saying palpable because I don't know other way to explain something that I shouldn't be able to articulate and feel, but I do. And so through a series of these, I end up finding a space that's really against the mountain. There are these three boulders that have kind of formed this little area that I can actually, get up inside and, sit in. I can see off in the distance where I'd park my car where everybody else is, but there's nobody around me at all. And after having some grapes and some water, and I was listening to music, all of a sudden, the music stopped. I was sitting on the ground, had my legs stretched out, and my back was against, the side of the mountain. Well, when the music went off, I leaned up because my phone's in my back pocket. And when I looked at it, the power was off. And when I went to try and start it again, it didn't make any sense. And then I felt the breeze from behind me. When I turned around, there's a hole where I had just been leaning up against solid rock. So when I stood up to take it in, you could kind of see where I was. There was a little like a rise that kind of went up and then it went down. Later, it would come to me that this is the remnants of a lava tube, which makes perfect sense. But down there, after my eyes adjust enough, it looks like there's somebody down there. And as soon as I get that thought in my head, somebody asks me, "Would I do I wish to see Telos?" So I made my way down, and the being that I saw, I thought was an adult-sized person, my height or so. I'm 6 feet tall. When I got near enough, after the light conditions changed enough in there, so I could really see what I was seeing, this dude, Alex, called himself, was 8 feet and change. He looked clearly down at me, but he was like flawless. His features were flawless. Was wearing white and had these colored kind of, I would say that they look like ribbons. And I never knew whether that was indicative of some kind of rank that he had, or whether that was just kind of some kind of Lemurian bling. And this was the day that he wore it. But anyway, he said, "You can call me Alex." I said, "That'll be easy to remember. That's my son's name." He goes, "Yeah, we know about your son. Follow me." So on the way down this slope, he's explaining the nature of, how they're governed, what the Council of 13 is. He explains the multiple levels that are there in the city. And I can begin to see where we're headed. There's light coming from that other direction. And when we get close enough to kind of the bottom where I see this is going to open up, I turned around to look behind me to see where we come from. There's no light at all. I can't see where we came from. Later, it would make sense that that was a portal that opened up, that my vibration matched enough that I could pass through it with assistance from them. And so when we get down to this, the bottom of this place where it kind of opened up now, it was like this staging area, like it almost uh, like a bus terminal. So across from us where we came in, there were 5 more of these lava tubes. And immediately to our left, there was like this platform, like 6 foot by 6 foot, if I had to guess. And it looked like there were 2 like bucket seats on it. No console, no nothing else. And there was another one over there. And when I looked this way, there was another one over there. Well, by the time I had, taken account of all this, Alex had, walked around to the other side and sat down and, indicated for me to sit next to him. And as soon as I did, this thing started to levitate and off we went into that middle tube. When we got toward the other end and the light started to come from the opposite side, clearly the walls of these tubes are embedded with crystals that had just been there forever. And so when the light hits them and refracts, every inch that you move just refracts it in a different way. You're like in a living kaleidoscope. It was awesome. I never wanted it to end. And then when we got to the other end of this tube and its destination, you open up to the city of Telos. Here you are, level 1. If you look up, you can't see wherever their ceiling is supposed to be, but this place is lit like there's sunlight coming through here. There's no beams of light in here, so I couldn't understand that. And as soon as we get into this space, well, he takes this craft and gets us at to a level that you've seen these cityscape pictures. This is what I see. The nature of the city and how it's laid out is circular in design. In the middle of this particular level is a huge white pyramid with a capstone on the top of it, and all the other buildings are crystalline in fashion. You can see pods of people here and there. They weren't really paying attention to me, and I was just kind of trying to take the rest of it in while he was explaining what I was seeing. As we were going to move to another place, he came down a little over and we kind of hovered over the city enough so that I could see, some of these other people long enough to make eye contact with five or six of them. And it was like I knew them and they knew me. So you get that sensation going through there. And later, after this visit, I'll run into two people that I'll meet along the way. Not too long after that, that look exactly like those people, two of the five that are here on the surface. One that's tall enough to be a Lemurian, and the other one whose face just looked like the person that I saw. Here they were. And both of them resonate with Atlantis and Lemuria. So, there's just common things all the way through it. We make our way down to the third level, and he shows me this. I was looking at 7 acres of their hydroponic gardens and how amazing the technology that they have for, feeding the populace here. It made me begin to wonder, what I had originally learned about how many Lemurians ended up in Mount Shasta post flood. When it finally sank, they had made preparations for a couple million, and really, in the end, 25,000 of them made it there. So there's been an awareness that that number grew over the years to like 1.2 million. And the recent information I have all over the planet is there's 4.8 million Lemurians in some form here while this shift is taking place. So even when you look at this and the nature of how wonderful this food system is, can that really feed the population? Well, you have to remember that they don't eat food because they have physical bodies like ours. We need food to drive this engine. They're not that. They get their energy really from direct solar energy. They eat because they like to eat, not because their form depends on it. And that's a whole different thing when you remember that they're crystalline light forms. And whatever energy they take in, we don't have to worry about restroom facilities anymore. Whatever energy they take in, they process in its entirety. And we're just not used to thinking that way in these carbon forms. But I'm here to kind of educate people a little bit on what to expect because we're not that far away from where it's going to happen. Anyway, when we finished in that area, we came back up to the first level, and when I had kind of panned the horizon from what I was looking at, there was a rounded kind of building off to almost the front right. That's where we were going to come back to. And so when this hovercraft of whatever you want to call it came back in front of that, it was a round building, and it had, these panels of crystal all the way around it that formed the walls. The opening was about the extent of like French doors. And on each side, etched in these crystal panels, were some light codes, thought they were light codes that I had seen before. And in the first trip I made to Shasta, before I started really hiking at all, and I was just getting familiar with the town, I had stopped in um, a shop that belonged to this little Japanese artist. Her name's Haruko, the gallery's Blue Star Child. And when I went in the first day, um, what I saw was extraordinary. I saw, this is during COVID, so remember. And when I saw her, there were shoe covers waiting for the people that came in. I misinterpreted that to think that, oh, they're there due to COVID. No, she's Japanese. People removed their shoes or they covered them, and so that was just her culture. And it took me a while to understand that. Well, the first day I was there, I was curious about what I saw there, but I was going to come back another day when I could look at it. And when I was turning to leave, I could look at these things that she had drawn. They were 3 feet wide, 10 feet high, filled a wall. And when she draws these out, they're so perfectly symmetrical I can't understand how it's not done without machining, but she uses no straight edges, no curvature tools. She does all this by hand. And then she goes back and colors it in. It takes her months. She lays that out on the floor and works it. They're amazing. So there, when I came back, there's actually three sections to her shop. There's the front that you see, and there's plenty of displays there. Then there's a middle room with more of her art. And then there's one more room in the back, maybe 8 by 8. And it's got five of these things in it. She's situated it so that if you wish to go in there and spend some time, she's left a pillow in there for your knees or if you want to sit on it. When I saw it for the first time, I wanted to set some of my crystals in front of these things and just sit there and meditate for a while. So I went and asked permission. Would you mind if I spend some time back there meditating? She goes, no, that's what it's for. So I closed the door, and like 20 minutes later, I came out and their tears are just flowing out of me. And it's just whatever I received in there was so powerful that it just had to come out somehow. Later, as I left, the light codes that I saw on this side of the doorway of that room was what I saw on the left side of that entry. And the one I saw on the right side of the door leaving her space was the one I saw on the other side. And when I mentioned to Alex, I said, these look familiar. He goes, oh, yeah, those are Haruko's. And those light codes are accurate. One was the light code for New Earth, and the other one was the blueprint for the new angelic form, or humanity's original DNA blueprint. That's what I saw. So we moved into this room, and he explained this is the council chambers. In the middle, there's a round table that has 13 chairs around it. But man, there's some energy that you feel as soon as you move into this space. The whole time I was there, in my heart core, you just felt almost like there was something just pressing on it and just made you feel like the best hug you've ever had. Just the entire time I was in this space, it was just this almost a pulse in this section of me. Now, while I'm getting used to that and taking in what's in the room, five more people enter the room, and I can see four of them are female, and they're all freaking taller than I am. But the person in the middle I recognize as a Dama, and he's taller than they are. So once they get close enough to the table, they invite me to take a space, and then three of them are over here and three of them are over there, and they all introduce themselves to me and tell me who they are and what they do. And it would turn out that the first woman who spoke, remember Shyama's name of all of them. I apologize because every time I do this, I can remember Alex, of course, and Adama, but I can't remember the names of the other three females that were there and the roles that they played. But anyway, it was Shyama that kind of chaired this meeting once we got into it, because I'm curious, what am I doing here? And, what is this all about? Well, she went on to explain that the Lemurians are preparing for this shift that's imminent. This was back in the end of July in 2020, and even I had indications. I just felt that by like winter solstice, that the conditions were going to be right for the poles to flip and Earth to move into this new vibration. So that's what I was preparing for. And when she said they had that same sensation, that wow, when I heard that from somebody else, especially beings that were supposed to be beyond my reach, when they saw it coming, it was time to start to open yourself to believing that this was really going to happen. And so now when you pay attention to every earthquake you've heard, every flood that you've witnessed, and every unusual weather pattern that we have never seen before, solar experiences, are you getting it yet? Here are the indications of what is physically going to manifest itself here for Earth. So our job now is just to prepare humans that there's more catastrophes to come, but there are safe zones here on the planet that have been prepared. And our job is to help you just make sure that we help you raise your vibration so it matches that of New Earth. She's almost there. We're trying to get everybody to the same level of awareness that we are. And it ain't easy because we've all been conditioned all of our lives about things to believe and not believe. And I'm talking about experiences that certainly tax your believability quotient. But had I not, I never would have experienced Telos. So Telos, in the end, um, I didn't finish, what happened in the room, so I will. She went on to explain that they were looking forward to this event taking place because it was going to be the spot at which humanity finally vibrated at a level where they wanted to reintegrate with the surface. Yeah. No longer were they going to hide the things that they had, and they were more than happy and willing to share the technologies that they've got once we were in a place where we would use it wisely and use it, under with the idea that we're all connected to one another, unity and love and compassion. That was really our framework. We've just been stuck in this density for so long that we had to do a lot of work to break through, and it really took help from other outside of the planet influences to break the chains. We had been manipulated along the way. Can't deny that anymore. I don't spend a lot of my attention on it because I don't want to feed that energy, but it's true. Now, however, there's all kinds of angelic help, if you have no other way to see it other than that, that's making contact with all of us to get us ready for the things that we have yet to experience and the things that are a little beyond what we already understand. All of that magic is there waiting for you right now because you're about to get to a realm where you're experiencing it. I see spectrums of light that lots of others don't see yet. I hear spectrums of sound that others don't see yet. I recognize light codes and symbols that I see in the same way. But it's just a matter of time before, once people are aware of it and start to pay attention to it, all of this is going to be secondhand. Well, the reason why it's accelerating so quickly is because this condition's about to change fast, and we're doing everything we can to help everybody get on the same page. I am not here to beat people over the head to force them to understand what I've understood. I knew that my journey is different from everybody else's, and my lessons were different from everybody else's. And so, you can't, I can't unsee or unexperience the things that I've experienced. And so, as much as you want to tell me they didn't happen, I'm an experiencer and I'm an evidentiary medium. I'm a Capricorn that does his freaking due diligence. And I'm telling you, when I've come to my conclusions, I proved it to myself. When I built out the website, it wasn't really with the intention that I was trying to show people a map. I was showing you how I came to my conclusions. Here is how I proved it to myself. And when you started to watch how that built over like a couple of years, oh my God, here's the proof. After Telos, a year later, I would have experiences with six-dimensional light beings who were there, and that event was photographed. So that others, when they started to hear Lowell's story, wouldn't just hear a story like other people that have had these extraordinary stories. Here's pictures to back it up.
Yeah, do you have any plans on writing a book?
I did.
I
I
mean, another
took,
one?
uh, what's going to happen next will be in more like movie in video form. But yes, there have been things that have kind of crossed my path. Um, some individuals that had an idea about a storyline. And in the end, it has um, references to Inner Earth. One of the protagonists, it ends up in the first season, realizes she's not from around here. She has some special gifts. And by the end of the first season, I don't want I shouldn't say this because this is going to be a podcast, and I promise not to say it, but here I go. She realized she's from Inner Earth. And so when they started to do some research, this has been in the works for like 3 years. They started to find the images that I had created that had been poured through me through that AI illustration program I had been taught about, what I envisioned in Inner Earth. They found those and reached out to me and said, "Do you mind if we use some of these images?" And when they really found out about what my experience had been in Inner Earth, that led to a whole different dialogue in my mind, Jake. I think that production is going to serve the purpose so that people can really begin to understand and see themselves in Inner Earth. Now, why? Not because it's this cool sci-fi thing. When the last catastrophes took place here, where did a lot of those civilizations go? They went underground into Inner Earth. I'm here to tell you that Telos is one of 9 that I'm familiar with enough to speak about, but there's like 120 of these places in Inner Earth. And so when the last of these catastrophes come and humanity needs to find safe zones to just get through the changes that are still going to happen physically on the planet, here are places that are going to be waiting for us to integrate once we vibrate on the same level. That's why we're being led to all this information right now. So, it sounds like a crazy sci-fi novel. I'm telling you, this is not fiction.
So earlier you mentioned, I've heard you say this multiple times, and correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Is it Adama? The name
Adama.
Adama? Have you ever by chance heard of a name called Adomi?
It sounds familiar to me, but lots of things pass through my awareness.
Okay. And
Why do you
Adama is,
ask?
well, I had an experience where I was meditating, where I was just asking a lot of questions, and I got something back one time that said Adomi, and I believe it was spelled Adome. Is Adama Adama?
Yes.
Hmm. So yeah, the reason I asked is because it's only one letter off. Adomi.
There are lots of higher dimensional beings. We always want to give them a name and label them. If you were to really communicate with these people and you ask them who they were, your communication with them is telepathic in the first place. And it's more likely you're going to see that as a symbol. We're used to this. And in 3D, we're used to giving it a label, and then that's going to be good or bad. And the rest of how that all pans out. But we want to put it into a word. Well, where we're going, gang, we don't communicate like that anymore. There's a vibration that we feel really underneath all of it. And so symbols, sounds, colors, um, that is the way that we're going to communicate, because we can already, telekinetically, we can communicate with one another. Dave Wallace and I laugh at each other now because over the last couple of weeks, especially, Dave will have looked at his phone the moment that I thought to call him, and there we are. It just happens too often when people get to that level of awareness. You're just kind of clicked into. It's almost like a whole grid that everybody else that's on the same party line you can connect with in that way. And without me actually texting or calling Dave, we're already on the same wavelength of something that's going on in our field. It's amazing. It took time to just get to that realization. First of all, when you get these gifts, it takes a while for you to figure out, what is this? And what's it supposed to mean to me? And then, how do you put that in context? Then, as other members of your tribe show up, they kind of answer some of the questions in between on the reasons why that happened and that happened. And, oh, when Dave came along, that's when all of this opened up. You can kind of see more clearly on the grand plan instead of focusing on, whatever's on the screen in front of me.
So earlier you mentioned New Earth. Just for our newer listeners, I'm sure most of our listeners do know, but just for our newer listeners, can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. Um, Earth is in a cosmic cycle. We are, even scientists agree that we're in a whole new band of photon light energy that's coming our way from our central sun, which feeds, everything that it feeds. Our solar system is one small part of that, and where we find ourselves in this um, progression of the equinoxes. That reset in 2012. We went back to 0 point. And from 2012 for the next 2,000 years, we are in a sweet spot. This is the age of Aquarius you heard about before. And this is one of those golden ages. We have had them before, but not for the last 26,000 years. We've stepped into it. And so when you sense all these energies that are changing, here is the reason why. This light these light packets that I was talking about that are upgrading us cellularly, as well as sentient beings like the planet, everyone's vibration, it's evolving to the next level. And it's Earth's turn in her cosmic cycle to move from 3 to 4. Wasn't contingent on whether humanity and all the other sentient life all kumbaya together. She's on her own cosmic cycle, and she's a sentient being of her own. So she's moving to a vibrational level that's higher than we were used to. And so now it's all the other sentient life's job to kind of raise their own vibration so it matches where the new version of Earth is going to be. Anything that we were used to experiencing in this third density, that just entropies away. It can't vibrate at that higher level anymore, so you can't have those experiences anymore. Your soul moves to the next stage of evolution, and where we're going is no longer like this.
So earlier, obviously, you mentioned the Lemurians. Have you ever been in contact or got to communicate with anything other than Lemurians?
I have not yet, but there's somebody in the tribe, and you've heard me refer to Dave Wallace. Dave Wallace has. And when I look at the relationship between Dave and I see two really cool bridges where my experiences was with, higher beings that are already here in inner Earth. That's where my expertise is. Now, Dave has been off planet. He was not an abductee, so I don't want to place it that way. But Dave was taken off planet in 2017, and it took him a good 4 years for him to understand what had happened. He took pictures while he was there from inside the craft. And so he's begun to get to the point where he's comfortable enough with what it means, so that he's beginning to talk about it. But he, like me, we were on the conference circuit for a while. It's not for us. It's not where we think our message is supposed to be. And when you find out what the rest of the community is like, there's too much ego involved in all of that. And the message gets muddled. But Dave has had experiences with multiple beyond Earth sentients. He can speak intelligently about the number of different beings have visited Earth and he's had experiences in his own home with ambassadors from these other species that are coming to, scope us out. They want to come and understand more about what to expect on Earth with humans when they come, and they're coming soon. There now, becomes the issue on how do we unring the bell on all the things that humanity believes it knows about what they call aliens. That there's an invasion coming, and that they all want to bite our heads off, and that the reptilians have had nefarious ideas. I can tell you that there was a place in history where a lot of that was true. And there are parts of, the people who were our leaders who knew about it. And it was just, hidden for a long time. Well, you can't hide that anymore. When I started having my multidimensional experiences, that's when it occurred to me, no one can stop you from have that happening. So um, you need to see it for what it is and assist the others that are coming along, that are coming into this same awareness, who are just looking for touchstones. Believe me, I didn't, I wanted to talk about it to the level where I could find somebody else that could help me understand what the hell I went through. That was what I was looking for. And that's when I began to talk about it. But I wasn't interested in being one of those freaking spiritual talking heads and telling what you needed that I only had and you needed to get it from me. That was just bullshit to begin with. That yes, there's influences that are waiting to help us, but they're really not outside ourselves. It's stuff that we've been storing along for a long time. And it's just time for us to regain our mastery so that we can use it right now. We're moving to a place where we get to have that at our disposal all the time. The things that we forget in these incarnations and have to kind of start all over again by learning, we're not that handcuffed anymore. In the next space, we don't lose any of our Akashic records. And now we finally get to see what humanity can really do on the planet when we have been unaltered. Yeah.
And do you think that this could happen in our lifetime?
It's, I've been told it was going to happen within mine. I will tell you that in January, I'll be 70 years old. The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
Now, my health, I can tell you, is better than it's ever been. And some of that was just kind of surrendering to what the universe made me crave. But I was 35 pounds heavier not that long ago. And I did not start an exercise or a diet regimen. It just, I was just reshaped. That explains, some of that was whatever energy I get from Shasta, because that's an exchange. I certainly carried that away with me because, man, my joints feel like I was young. I've had a history of high blood pressure before this awakening. And I was a hockey player all my life. So, your joints ached after you skated. I don't experience any of that pain, and my high blood pressure has been gone for 6 years. I haven't seen or needed to see a medical doctor since my follow up with my surgeon in January of 2016, all through COVID. And I was certainly close to people who were diagnosed with lousy versions of it. I didn't suffer through any of it. I didn't get sick at all. So I know that there's some kind of protection that I had, but this other light that had been coming my way, I believe, was kind of the basis for whatever protection, my aura was being provided with. There's no other way to explain why I didn't get sick like everybody else.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The reason I ask is because, people like, do you know Chris Bledsoe? Have you heard of Chris
Yeah,
Bledsoe?
that name's familiar. Mm-hmm.
He just published a book called UFO of God. It was really fascinating. Another woman named Dolly Safran, Preston Dennett. A lot of these people, even though they're not going way out of their way to talk about it, because they're not trying to put people in fear and they don't want them to vibrate lower, but there's some people who think that maybe within the next 3-4 years, even there's going to be a big change. Have you heard anything like that? Like more specifically in the next 3-4 years?
I don't think it's going to take that long, in all honesty. Really, tomorrow is just as ripe a day for this pole flip and whatever is going to happen. The conditions are right. I think that there's still some time on the timeline. There's some slippage from what I thought originally in my mind. Honestly, Jake, I thought by the end of 2025, this is done. Now, I believe that we have some additional time, but not much. So all the more reason for us to just educate people about what's to come. And when I first came across information on these safe zone areas, these golden tie places, and I'd seen that timeline in there, I had the same impulse you did. You can't really tell this to the collective because they'll freak. a lot of them just won't understand when they see these catastrophes. They can't see it beyond, they're just going to lose their lives because they can't see beyond that. But now there's a way for us to communicate this a little bit better, and that this is not the end. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation, I'm telling you that this condition on Earth that scientists have advised us is happening. And every, space weather enthusiast is pointing to this phenomenon going on now. It's imminent. So, what we're trying to help you understand is kind of get a hold of your vibration, understand how your chakras work and how you kind of match the electromagnetic. You're an electromagnetic being like the earth is. And when you can connect to it on that level, you'll see where we're going beyond, this carbon footprint that, yeah, it's going to die. We know that. But you don't end there. When people can just open themselves up to beyond that, now we can begin to explain, even with all this other catastrophe, these other areas on the planet, on the surface, and the ones that I referenced in inner Earth are going to be there and available to us during this time of transition. Your vibration is what's going to matter, nothing else.
Yeah, that's funny that, well, it's not funny, but I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, probably at the very least, every other episode, if not every single episode, we're talking about raising your vibrations. Um, which again is, you guys just go back to the last handful of episodes and you'll see exactly what we're talking about, of course. But when you keep saying catastrophe, I'm almost certain I know what you're going to say. Are you referring to anything to do with the sun, coronal mass ejection?
That's my understanding, is really that that's just an extension of that energy, that elevated energy that's come from the central sun. Our sun's really just modulating it, and it's affecting not just Earth. We just pay attention to that. Everything in our solar system is being affected by that, and you know that light quotient is being raised everywhere. We're just aware of it happening.
So one more question on this, and I'll drop it. And we can move on a little bit, but because you know, I've had dream not dreams. That's what I call them, dream not dreams, when I'm not sure whether or not they are. Um, but I've had this dream multiple times, and again, I'm not trying to put fear in anybody, but I've had catastrophe type dreams. What type of catastrophes, more specifically, do you think could possibly happen?
Well, you're watching them play out now. Look at just what happened in Libya with those floods that took out all those people there. Look at what happened with the fires in Lahaina. That's not unusual. I'm in Northern California, and I watched in 2018 fire come through my community and take out 5,300 homes. This is not happening just in these areas. Look around the planet. Look at I every day I watch the National Oceanic Atmospheric and NOAA has a website for space weather enthusiasts. So you can see the amount of impact it's having on the area and what affects Earth. I also watch the earthquakes that are going on the planet, because the USGS has a website where you can see the most recent ones anywhere on the planet. I've been watching these for the last couple of years, and everything is on an elevated basis. That energy that's coming from the sun that we used to see when I first saw the northern lights when I was younger, it was explained to me as that was the sun reflecting off the polar cap. And that was what I went along with for a long time. Well, now I understand that is the nature of this electromagnetic plasma that's coming from the sun. That's when it hits our pole. Some of it wraps around and finds its way in the other pole, but sooner or later it comes in here. So when that electronic discharge takes place, that's when the aurora borealis just, whoa, you see it. And the brighter it gets, the lower the latitudes you get to see that. I had only seen it in northern Minnesota once in my life that low. But holy cow, somebody in the Twin Cities this past year reported seeing it clearly from there. So here is evidence of this phenomenon that's taking place. That translates into earthquakes, tsunamis, because those are earthquakes under the water, all these volcanic eruptions. Look at all this horrible flooding that we've seen. Look, nature doesn't pay attention to the sentient critters crawling on her surface. When she is ready to, adjust to her new vibration level, that's going to play itself out physically in a lot of different ways. And so when I refer to catastrophes, these are the things I'm pointing to. And we see them on the news every day. All the more reason for me to believe that whatever this last boost of solar influence that's going to trigger Earth into her next level is right around the corner.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought was really fascinating, I've heard you speak of this many times, but that you're aware of 8 or 9 other mountain ranges that seem to have, or at the very least, you've heard that there are other beings in them. And this, guys, if you're not sure what Lowell is saying, go back to an episode that we had with Dr. Bruce Cornett. Um, he reported the same exact thing uh, when he was communicating with the being. Supposedly, it had said that they live in the Andes, and he said, "Do you mean on?" And it said, "I live in the Andes," meaning inside of the Andes. Do you mind sharing a couple of the other ones that you've heard?
Not at all. In fact, when they were brought back to my awareness and understood why, um, I went back and on my YouTube channel, I did like a 3 minute. When I was in the hotel business, we used to call them fam tours. So you bring um, travel agents and travel writers from all over the world. You bring them into your city and you'd show them all these things. So then when away, they knew what they saw. Well, I took the 9 cities I knew of. Telos, I already knew was one of them. And I created these 3 minute clips and I put them on YouTube. So if I remember the names right, and I got them from a few different sources, and they all lined up. Some of it I heard from Diane Robbins' work that she had written. One was a Swedish woman who I still can't pronounce her last name, but her talking about Agartha in the Inner Earth, that was her. And then Radu Cinema, this Romanian that wrote about some inner earth cities. He had identified some of them. So if you go there, you can find each one of these 9 and you can kind of see what I had envisioned as those inner earth areas. But that's not to say that there are, to our understanding, there are 120 of these places. Some were Lemurian bases. They were the Lemurians went. Some were Atlanteans. Not all the Atlanteans were dark. That just happened to happen on their watch. And then there are other civilizations that we're unfamiliar with yet, but they're all here. Part of our ability to understand it is open yourself up to multidimensionality because these areas exist in that realm. I was able to boots on the ground. Fourth and fifth dimensional Earth are physical planes. So, yeah, you're going to be able to experience them in a physical form. And once you get to sixth and beyond, your light forms and your light bodies once again. But the idea that we can have these experiences physically in these higher realms is absolutely possible. I'm proof of such things. I just happened to vibrate at a level that made it possible for me to experience those things. That is what I'm trying to help others understand. You get yourself to that level of vibration, and everything else that vibrates at the same level around you is now able for you to experience. And it's all around us now.
Yeah, and again, we do a pretty good job, I think. Well, the reason I started this sincerely is because I just want to help people my age or younger. I'm somewhat young. I'm like what do they call that? I'm like a veteran young man. They say that before you become, a man, but I'm 37, and a lot of our listeners, believe it or not, are like 18 through 30, which is really low for a project or podcast on the subject. But could you recommend to the newer listeners or the younger ones who this may be over their head, how one could raise their vibrations?
I don't think that it's beyond their capacity. It's harder for me to influence my generation because we've just been stuck in this conditioning for so long that what we thought we learned in school, church, friends, social, what hobbies, we have this preconceived notion of what we think is right and wrong. But given our experience in third dimensional experiences, I believe that the generations behind me didn't come as handicapped and are more open to the ideas beyond what we, kind of locked ourselves into. They're more open to things that they didn't really understand. And, as much as people my age, want to see a miracle, and then the miracle shows up and they go, yeah, that can't be. Your generation and the ones behind that, you didn't come out fitted that way. I see more, especially young kids now, really young ones that are wise beyond their years. Well, here, this little soul came repeat package, and her Akashic records are totally at her um, um, beck and call. She didn't come into this incarnation because what this incarnation right now needs is somebody that's vibrating at a higher level. So that generation is kind of coming in pre-packaged. And part of their job is to help their parents see the things that they didn't see.
Well, there were a couple more. These are just kind of fine details that I was curious about. And please forgive me if I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. Is it Heroku?
Haruko.
Haruko, I apologize. Um,
Mm-hmm.
can you tell us a little bit more about her? And maybe this is an odd
Wow.
interpretation, but um, maybe I'm way off on this. Do you think that she could be, say, something that a lot of these new age people are calling like hybrids, or do you think that there's a possibility that she's not?
She's not a hybrid. And I can speak to hybrids because a hybrid was the one who introduced me to the light beings. That's a different topic. Haruko, no, no. If you were to ask me who I thought she was, Haruko's an oracle. She has this gift to illustrate the things that she can illustrate. And there's almost two sides to her. Now, this was before I knew that the girl could sing and play the flute because she plays, it's just amazing. There was, when I first was attracted to the things that she drew, it was how incredible, how big a scale, and how perfect the dimensionality was on these light codes that she'd drawn. So, I mean, they just each side mirrored each other. How in the world does somebody hand draw that? That was fascinating. But when you see the playful side of her plays out, because she has this affinity for rabbits, when you see her illustrate those things, this is like a whole different cosmic playground that she has somehow illustrated. And I believe that, it's her job to channel those things out for us to see. And only she does that. Her shop is full of that kind of stuff. And from the first time I met her, and I'd heard a little bit more about her. She was originally from Sedona and had a shop there for years, and then was drawn to Shasta like a lot of people are. Well, when she got there, she really expected that the metaphysical community would kind of embrace her and, just accept her as one of their own. And yeah, that didn't happen. She felt like an outsider for a long time. And the first few times I was in her shop, you could tell that she was, really withdrawn. After the word got out on what I had seen in Telos and my connections to where they were in Haruko's shop, something shifted because there were a lot of people that went there that just had to see what I was talking about. Um, and it almost seemed like she just opened up. That was when she began to perform on her flute, which is amazing. She used to just take it up to the mountain and play it. Now she's recorded it so others can listen to it. And then when she began to sing in some of these performances she'd do in her shop, man, it was amazing to me. I could sit and listen to that for she'd usually do these 1 hour performances, and they were amazing. This was like professionally put on, and here's this little girl over in the corner who can draw like this, who has this other gift inside of her too. Amazing.
Wow. Yeah, she sounds like a really incredible artist, and yeah, I mean, an oracle. Really, that's probably the best way to describe it. And then
Yes.
again, these are just fine details. That again, I'm just more curious than anything. Um, you mentioned, somewhat of a craft when you were entering into Telos. Could you describe in maybe a little bit greater detail of what the craft was like itself?
Well, there have been a couple other descriptions. When I ran across this Sharula Ducks narration, Sharula, I've been asked if I had heard about Sharula in the fall of 2020. After the word kind of leaked out, one of the organizers of a conference up there in Shasta, Rob Potter, had asked me if I'd ever heard about her. And when I found her content, Sharula, according to what we understand, was a Lemurian who lived here on the surface for a while. She got here, I want to say, in the late 1980s, and until 2005, 2007, or somewhere in there, she just dropped off the map again. While she was here, she would tell people about Lemuria and try and educate them on Telos. And she happened to be the daughter of the king and queen, Ra and Rana Mu. And so she was Princess Sharula. Uh, I happened to find this last interview that she'd done. Diane Robbins, who I got to meet, who's written 4 or 5 books on Inner Earth and Telos and her experiences with the Dhamma, had done a recording of one of Sharula's presentations. It was almost 2 hours long back in 1993 or 95, one of the two. And it had been posted on a website where somebody 15 years ago had chopped it up into 12 10-minute sections so you could listen to the entirety. So the first time I listened to it, I wasn't really engaged in the content. I wasn't really focused on, what this was. It would be like later this past year when the gravity of this would really hit me. And then, as much as I want to hear about the latest news on Telos, I had ignored somebody that had lived here on the surface. And so I got together with Diane Robbins and asked her, can I take that original content? Would you mind if I put it back all into, 2 hours, and then I'll illustrate it with some of the inner earth images? Well, she was totally on board. And once I listened to her narrative, it told me a whole lot more about what living in Lemuria was like, what daily life was like, what family life was like, what the community was like. And that was an eye opener. Well, it came along at a time when I was supposed to really see that and digest it. Now I was hungry for the information. And you can't deny that that body wasn't here. When you listen to the narrative and she explains that during this interview, she was 268 years old, it got your attention.
Yeah, I'm actually very familiar with Diana Robbins. I believe it's spelled the same way that my last name is spelled, Robbins.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I'll put a link to all of her books at the bottom of the show, of course. I actually reached out to her. I've not heard back from her. It's been some time. It's probably been about four
Yeah,
months.
she's been very ill. I can give you a little history because usually when I go to Shasta, we'd find a time to get together. Um, 2021, the second year I was there, I had reached out to her and she was gracious. We got together back then, and even then she was in her early 80s. Well, during COVID, she was hospiced. She couldn't really care for herself, and it was I want to say it was 6 months ago, and I heard about it. So maybe 8 months ago, she finally got back home and was in a place where she um, could function on her own. But she's ready, I can tell you. She's been in touch with the Lemurians, and they're waiting for her to welcome her on the other side. She's ready to go. And that's why I think she wanted to pass along when I came along. Um, I'll tell you a little bit about Diane first, because she's an author and protective of her territory. When I first met her that first time and we sat and exchanged information, it was wonderful, and there was a bond that we connected. There's an authenticity to her that can't be denied, and I think she sensed the same in me. The following year, there was a young lady who had moved to Shasta, had known about Diane, and had asked about me, and Diane arranged for the three of us to get together at Diane's home. And so when the narrative was about my story, you could tell Diane was kind of sitting in the corner and not participating. And after that meeting, she texted me and said she didn't want to communicate anymore. She just wanted to cut it off. And I thought, okay, I'm not quite sure. I sensed it was more her ego kicking in than anything, but yeah, I was probably right. Now, a year after that, I had been reached out to by a production company that was interested in doing some stories on the people that were missing and that phenomenon in Shasta. So they reached out to me. Well, I wasn't interested in looking. I'm not talking about sensationalizing any of that stuff that happened, but I gave him the name of Diane, and I gave him Rob Potter's name because here's a couple resources here that can talk about that intelligently. Well, after that, Diane had reached out to me again. And clearly, they came to some arrangement. They used her information. She reached out and began to say, I want to apologize about, and I stopped her there. I said, Diane, I don't know what happened. I don't know what triggered it, but it doesn't matter. You and I have work to do here, and that's more important. So whatever you think is between us is not there. Let's just continue on the path that we're on. And that's when I kind of kept up and checked on her a little more often. First, she has a son that is just kind of waiting for things to pass. And really, honestly, I just expect that the next news I'm going to hear was, she's finally stepped over to the other side. But she's ready.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably why she hasn't gotten back to you, because she's a typical day for her when she was up and around is she's up and around by like 10 in the morning, and then shortly after noon she needs to rest again. And she's 84 years old.
Yeah. She's up there. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'd really hate, there's so much. I've gotten written down probably 2 pages of notes. I'd love to do this again. At the very least, is there?
We absolutely can. Yes.
Okay. Well, at the very least, is there maybe one more story or detail that you'd like to share before we stop?
I'll tell you, the most significant part of all of that was interactions with light beings and the documentation that was left over from all that. What happened through there was you have to have a comprehension of hybrids and who these beings are. You have to kind of resign yourself to this is a half human being and half light person. That was who was to come across my path the first week in August. Did I know them from before? Not at all. But they seemed to know me. And over the course of the month of August, I'd have interactions that would be photographed. And later it would come, I would understand this because the first time it happened, and this person took pictures and showed them to me, and they were extraordinary. Here's me and light beings in the same photograph, and they're like making contact with me. I didn't understand what it meant. And she left. Well, the next day, unbeknownst to all of us, she came back again and brought some artifacts that she wanted to share with us that she had found along the way, as kind of proof of who she was. When I asked her how old these things were, she said about 30,000 years old as an average, and I'd seen a variety of artifacts. At the end of that day, then we were asked to go down on this spiral of huge Andaras that were on this property, and she photographed what took place that day too. Crazy. I came to understand later that what happened on Friday must have it must have met a condition with the light beings, or they wouldn't have shown up and she wouldn't have returned on the next day. So there was more to whatever I'd satisfied on Friday. That was the beginning of this path with light beings. And then 2 weeks later, while I'm in Shasta with her, I will have my final experience with them where I had asked if any of this was true, then you're going to validate it by one light being that shows up. I'll buy all of this, and four of them showed up in the photos. Okay, I'm good. I know what I'm supposed to do, and part of it is to show these images with me interacting with other light beings, so that other people could begin to put themselves in the picture. Here is what you have to look forward to. I wasn't going to be the only one. I'm going to be one of the first ones, so that when you hear this crazy story from somebody like Lowell, you almost got to believe the guy, because it's not him to tell these stories otherwise. Why in the world would I wait to this stage in my life to go down this particular rabbit hole?
Yeah. I think the vast majority of our listeners, I would imagine 80, 90% of them understand, accept, and believe people when they say that they've either met or are themselves hybridized. However, there is some that, it's even me. I mean, if you would have asked me before I started to realize, that our family seems to be at the very least involved or checked up on for multiple generations by certain races, I don't know that I would even believe it. But I've been told. Do you know Preston Dennett?
I know, yes, I know the name.
Yeah, long story short, he wrote I think 40 books in like 35 or 36 years. It's a very legitimate author, and according to him, he's had I think like 880 interviews, like official interviews. And this woman, Dolly Saffron, um, she was the subject. It was the only book he ever wrote entirely about one experiencer. And he says he's got over 100 hours of just questioning and vetting before he ever
Yeah.
started to write it.
Yeah, that's not unusual. I certainly understand it now. I thought at the outset that I was going to have this experience and tell us, and that would be the amazing story I would tell forever. No, that was phase one of understanding multidimensionality so that I would be able to explain it to others. So when they began to have these experiences, they would have a touchstone that they could reach out to that could explain the phenomena that was going on.
Mm. But yeah, I guess the only reason I was bringing that up is this woman, Dolly, who we brought on. She made some very lofty claims that I'll be honest, it was pretty hard for me to believe. I always felt like I was an experiencer, or a contactee in some form or fashion. But she said, after about 40 minutes in, that she's been on craft with me, and not only that, but I was not, essentially that I was a hybrid myself, which again
I
seemed.
believe it. Yeah, I wouldn't close my awareness out to any possibilities, because in there's some, there's questions you must have about yourself. Um, there are some lovely hybrids that have come all across my path, and I know what they're here to do, and they're here intentionally. They chose to be here in this incarnation,
Mm,
and they're part of a whole different world of really understanding the blending of cultures, should we
mm.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, Preston and Dolly both said that's probably most likely why I'm doing this. Just trying to help, what I think is just younger people understand this field or the phenomena altogether, but that was just their interpretation, I suppose.
I don't doubt that for a minute. Somebody has to be the way showers. And you clearly have a circle of people that you have some influence with. So, I was really mindful about before I wanted to talk about any of this stuff because I appreciate and respect my own sovereignty. I really want to respect that to everyone else in return. So I enjoy advice, but I'm not crazy about getting it unsolicited. That's why I'm not here to beat what I know over anybody over the head with what I know is true. I'm here to kind of assist you with your own terms because you got your own journey, your own lessons. Somehow I'll benefit from what you're going through, but I wasn't meant to be part of it. And for me to insert myself into your business, I've created a karmic cord that didn't need to be there. So
Mm.
all I should do is send you love and light and allow you on your way so that whatever you were meant here to learn, I don't get in the way of that. In the end, like I said, all of our Akashic information benefits the entire collective. So why would I want to screw with that? I don't. Um, you have your circle of influence over your people. And at first, when I was talking about, I wanted to be careful about the message I put out there because I knew I didn't want to influence somebody else. My guide said that's the wrong approach to take. You do have influence with these people. And so, if somebody's going to paint a picture and give them an illustration of what to expect, let's do it before somebody else plants a seed that you have to have them unlearn before you get to the information we want them to have. So more and more people like you that are really doing their due diligence so they can speak intelligently about these things to their pods of people. I bless your hearts for doing what you do because lots of other people would just kind of poo-poo this and just let it go.
Yeah, yeah. It's been if anything, I don't I we make a little bit of money. We're not doing it for money. We're really not. I mean, it's just ads that they just kind of throw on there. We don't do like a Patreon type thing. But yeah, I mean, if anything, at first I thought of it like as a hobby, and then I realized that is helping educate not only myself but our listeners. So it's been a really great experience. But I did have one more question for you. This one, I don't know that I'm going to keep doing this because it's a little off the wall. I have an intense, absolutely intense connection with owls. I'm not sure why, but I always have. So much so that a few times I've meditated and asked to either see them or hear them, and I do somewhat regularly. So have you ever had any strong connection to any animals by chance?
Always. Well, I have a connection. The phrase "the protector of Gaia" was applied to me. I understand more, what that phenomenon's about now. Um, it's not just when I'm outside in nature. I have this aura with animals. Doesn't matter what kind of animals they are. I'm not afraid of any of them. It's not like I think anyone's going to bite. So, like when bees are flying around, you don't freak out anymore. You understand that there's a symbiosis between me and them, and it doesn't matter what the animal is. It just seems like when I'm around, there's just this calming presence between us, and I I love it. I like nature and trees and what I get to experience. But when there's some life around, I seem to be able to connect to it. And I just observe. I'm here as an observer in the first place. So I get to watch that little interaction. And where in the past, I know that there were times when uh, something would startle me and that plays itself out and then whatever being is in the area freaks out too. I can attest and thank meditation for getting you to that place. I knew the day that I could reach that level of real quiet when like a door would slam behind you or a book would get dropped and normally you jump out of your chair, and when nothing happens you go, how the hell did I achieve this state of quiet? The door just slammed and normally in the past I would have jumped. Nothing. So when you reach that level of peace, wow, you're connected to things where you can start to place your intent out there and watch it be amplified.
Mhm. Wow. Well, Lowell, I really do appreciate your time. I really sincerely hope we can stay in touch. And I mean, I got through some of these, probably maybe a third of these. But if you'd ever want to come back on, we'd be more than honored to have you back. I think that your story is absolutely incredible. What probably one of the most interesting I've ever heard. But I just sincerely want to thank you for coming on, educating myself and our listeners, and we really do appreciate your time.
I'm happy to do it, Jake. It's part of what my purpose is. And I've got some other people for you to meet that have extraordinary experiences too that others are meant to hear. So you just let me know when you want to follow up and we'll make it happen because I want to answer your questions. Um, when I decided to do my podcast channel, it wasn't that I was going to host this, thing and you were going to listen to me. It was just like you had started out to let others kind of share their stories. And here is where they found a bond with the rest of their tribe is here's a place where it's safe for me to talk about something that happened like 30 years ago. And I put a lid on it up until now because who talks about these things? We need to provide environments where people know that they're not going to be judged. And
Mm.
I want to hear what they have to say and how it matches up with my journey.
Yeah, yeah. I just really wish we had. If these were 3 hours long, the thing is, we've done a couple. There's a guy, Mike Clelland. Uh, our conversation went way too long, and you can see the numbers. And right around that hour and a half mark, they just
Yeah,
sunk.
people are fatigued,
Yeah,
especially with this topic. Look, Jake, we're talking
it's a
about
heavy
stuff
subject.
that's new to a lot of people,
Yeah.
and I don't want to overload anybody. I had to learn this in like phases, and once this level I got, the next level made sense, and it took me 4 years, and I was on an accelerated path.
Oh,
So I'm mindful of what others want to learn. And I like this exchange format better, where you
mm,
got questions, ask your questions, and I'll do the best to answer those rather than you listening to me drone on and on about things that might not even apply to you.
mm. No, yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and I mean it's been a really great conversation, really fluent, and it's probably because I've listened to so many of your interviews or podcasts, but I feel like I've known you for a while, so it's really nice to actually meet you instead of just listening to you.
Oh, thanks for saying so. Well, you just name the time and we'll follow up soon because I'm sure that we've triggered questions for lots of your other listeners too, and we might as well address them.
Absolutely. Well, you have a great
Okay.
day. I appreciate
You
your
too.
time, Mr. Johnson.
All right, buddy. Have a good
Take care.
day.
You too, buddy.